I never thought my own flesh and blood would throw me out like garbage. But there I was, watching Greg toss my clothes onto our front porch while the neighbors stared. "Go sleep in the dog shed, old man," he screamed, slamming my bedroom door and locking it from inside. Just 3 weeks after burying Martha, my wife of 45 years, I found myself clutching our wedding photo in that leaky shed as rain pattered through the roof. I was 67 years old and homeless in the house I built with my own 2 hands. But one phone call was about to change everything. Martha and I built our little 3-bedroom ranch house on Oakwood Drive back in 1978, when land outside of Riverdale was still affordable. We weren't rich by any means, but we had 45 good years together. I worked as a master carpenter for the county until retirement 6 years ago, and Martha taught 3rd grade at Lincoln Elementary until her health started failing. We were simple people who wanted a simple life. Our backyard faced west toward the foothills, and most evenings we'd sit on the porch swing I built, watching the sunset with glasses of iced tea. Sometimes we wouldn't even talk, just sit there holding hands, comfortable in the silence of 2 people who knew each other's thoughts before they were spoken. Our only child, Greg, came along after 7 years of trying. I remember holding him in the delivery room, this tiny red bundle, thinking I had never seen anything so perfect in my life. But raising him wasn't easy. Even as a young boy, he had a temper that would flare up like a sudden summer storm. The smallest disappointments would send him into rages that left Martha in tears. 3 different elementary schools asked us to get him evaluated, but the specialists never gave us consistent answers. One said attention deficit, another said oppositional defiant disorder. A third suggested he was just highly spirited. Whatever the label, living with him was walking on eggshells. High school was worse. Greg got in with a rough crowd, started skipping school, and once I found a bag of pills hidden in his sock drawer. When I confronted him, he punched a hole in his bedroom wall and didn't speak to me for 2 weeks. Martha always made excuses for him. "He's just finding himself," she'd say. "Or he feels things more deeply than other people." The biggest surprise came when he was 28 and announced he was engaged to Jessica, a quiet nurse he met at the hospital where he worked as an orderly. Jessica seemed too good for him, honestly, but she brought out a steadier side of Greg we hadn't seen before. For almost a decade, things were better. They gave us twin grandchildren, Andy and Alice, now 10 years old, and Greg seemed to settle into family life. Then came the layoffs at the hospital 3 years ago. Greg couldn't find steady work afterward, picking up odd jobs that never lasted. The old moods returned, darker than before. Martha would slip them money for rent or groceries without telling me, though I always found out when balancing our checkbook. "They're family," she'd say when I objected. "What else are we supposed to do?" Last September, Martha started having stomach pains. By Christmas, she could barely keep food down. The diagnosis came in January: pancreatic cancer, already stage 4. The doctors gave her 6 months, but she only lasted 12 weeks. Those final weeks were a blur of hospital rooms, medication schedules, and watching my beloved Martha fade away like a photograph left in sunlight. Greg surprised us both by stepping up during her illness. He visited almost daily, bringing the twins on weekends. He'd sit beside her bed, holding her hand and talking about happy memories from his childhood. One day I overheard him say, "Don't worry about Dad, Mom. I'll take care of everything." Those words comforted me. Maybe Martha's illness had finally matured him. Maybe losing her would bring us closer as father and son. Martha passed peacefully in her sleep on a Tuesday morning in April. I was holding her hand when her breathing changed, then stopped altogether. I sat there for almost an hour, unable to let go, until the hospice nurse gently told me it was time. The funeral was beautiful, with flowers from Martha's garden club and her former students filling the church. Greg handled most of the arrangements, dealt with the funeral home, and even helped me write the obituary. I was numb with grief, moving through the motions of receiving condolences and thanking people for coming. At the reception afterwards in our home, I was in the kitchen alone, staring into a cup of untouched coffee, when Greg appeared in the doorway. His face had changed somehow, hardened into an expression I didn't recognize. "We need to talk about arrangements," he said flatly. "Arrangements?" I repeated, not understanding. I'll give you 2 weeks to find someplace else to live. Mom left the house to me. I thought I'd misheard him. What are you talking about? The will, Dad. Mom changed her will before she died. She left the house to me, not you. That's impossible, I said. Martha and I had simple wills drawn up years ago, leaving everything to each other. Then to Greg after both of us were gone. Check the paperwork, Greg said, sliding a folder across the counter. It's all legal. I opened the folder with trembling hands to find what appeared to be an amended will, dated just 6 weeks before Martha died, leaving the house and all assets solely to Greg, with no provision for me whatsoever. A strange lawyer's name I didn't recognize was at the bottom. James Wilson. This can't be right, I said, feeling like the floor was tilting beneath me. Why would she do this? Where am I supposed to go? Greg shrugged. Not my problem. 2 weeks, Dad. He walked out, leaving me standing there surrounded by casserole dishes and sympathy cards, holding a document that erased 45 years of marriage, as if it never existed. The next morning, I confronted Greg when he came by to check on me. In reality, he was already measuring windows for new curtains, while Jessica awkwardly avoided making eye contact with me. I want to see the actual will, I demanded, not just this summary. And I want to speak with this lawyer, Wilson. Greg's face darkened. You're calling Mom a liar? She did this because she was worried you'd blow through her life insurance on some retirement fantasy. That's ridiculous. Martha and I discussed everything. We were going to use that money for her medical bills and maybe fix the roof. The roof had been leaking for 2 years, but Martha's medical expenses had drained our savings. Well, she changed her mind. Greg snapped. And honestly, Dad, 2 weeks is generous. I've got plans for this place. What plans? I asked. I'm thinking of selling it, he said casually. Jessica and I need a bigger place, and this lot is worth good money now. My heart nearly stopped. Sell it? This was your mother's home. We built it together. It's outdated and too small, he said dismissively. The market's hot right now. Greg. Jessica interjected softly. Maybe we should discuss this later. He ignored her. You know what? 2 weeks is too long. You've got 3 days to clear out. 3 days? That's impossible, I protested. Where am I supposed to go? All my friends are in this neighborhood. Everything I own is here. Should have thought about that before you let this place fall apart, Greg said. The roof leaks, the furnace is ancient, and that deck is practically rotting away. Mom deserved better than this. His words stung because there was some truth to them. I had let maintenance slide during Martha's illness, focusing all my energy on her care. But we'd planned to make repairs once she recovered. It was our home. Imperfect, but loved. I'm not leaving, I said firmly. Not until I speak with Martha's actual lawyer and see the official will. Greg's face turned an alarming shade of red. Fine. Have it your way. He stormed out, with Jessica following reluctantly behind, giving me an apologetic glance over her shoulder. For 2 days, an uneasy silence filled the house. Greg and Jessica came and went, bringing boxes and packing supplies. They took measurements and discussed renovations as if I wasn't there. I tried calling the lawyer listed on the paperwork, but the receptionist at the firm said no, James Wilson worked there and never had. On the 3rd day, I returned from grocery shopping to find my bedroom door locked. When I knocked, Greg answered with a cold smile. This is my room now, he said. I've packed your things. What are you talking about? I demanded. Where are my clothes? My medications? On the porch, he said. Then he slammed the door in my face and locked it from inside. I hurried to the front porch to find my clothes dumped in haphazard piles. My heart medication had spilled across the welcome mat. As I knelt to gather my belongings, I heard windows opening and neighbors peering out. Shame burned through me like acid. When I tried to get back inside, the front door was locked. I pounded on it until Greg finally opened it, standing there with my old suitcase in one hand. Go sleep in the dog shed. Old man, he screamed, throwing the suitcase at my feet. Try to come back in, and I'll call the cops for trespassing. The few neighbors still watching quickly disappeared behind curtains. I stood there in shock, holding an armful of rumpled clothes, as Greg slammed the door. Our old dog shed stood at the back corner of the property, a simple wooden structure we'd built for Duke, our golden retriever who passed away 5 years ago. It hadn't been used since, except for storing a few garden tools. The roof leaked, the floor was dirt, and spiders had taken up residence in every corner. With nowhere else to go immediately, I cleaned it out as best I could and made a makeshift bed from an old sleeping bag I found in the garage. That night, lying on the hard ground listening to raindrops plink through the roof, I felt a depth of loneliness I'd never experienced before. I held the only possession I truly cared about, a framed photo of Martha and me on our 40th anniversary, and let the tears come. Around midnight, a soft knock on the shed door startled me awake. I opened it to find Jessica standing there with a flashlight, a thermos, and a bundle under her arm. "I brought you some soup," she whispered, handing me the thermos, "and extra blankets. I'm so sorry about this." "Thank you," I said, my voice hoarse. "Jessica, what's happening? Why is he doing this?" She glanced nervously back at the house. "Greg's changed since before Martha got sick. He's been secretive, meeting with people I don't know. There's gambling debts I just found out about." She lowered her voice even further. "He met with Martha's lawyer several times alone while she was in hospice. He told me it was to help with paperwork, but he wouldn't let me come along. Martha would never have cut me out like this," I said. "We discussed our wills just last year when she was first diagnosed." "I believe you," Jessica said. "Something isn't right. Greg's been obsessed with the house, talking about selling it almost from the moment Martha passed. He keeps mentioning a big payday that will solve all our problems." A car door slammed in the distance, and Jessica jumped. "I have to go. The twins don't know what's happening. Greg told them you decided to move out. I'll try to bring more supplies tomorrow." After she left, I couldn't sleep. Jessica's words confirmed my suspicions that something was very wrong with the will, but proving it would be difficult without legal help, something I couldn't afford since discovering Greg had somehow emptied our joint checking account of nearly $42,000 the day after Martha died. I spent that night planning my next steps, determined not to let Greg steal the home Martha and I had built together through a lifetime of love and hard work. 3 days passed in that miserable shed. The spring nights were cold, and despite Jessica's blankets, I woke each morning with stiff joints and a damp sleeping bag. She brought food when she could, slipping away while Greg was at work or meeting someone she referred to only as his new friends. On the 4th day, I walked to the local police station. Officer Pete Simmons had been a friend for years. Our sons played Little League together, and I hoped he might help. "Dane, I'm real sorry about Martha," Pete said, ushering me into a small interview room, "and about what you're going through with Greg. But without proof of ownership or tenant rights, there's not much we can do. It's a civil matter." "He forged the will," I insisted. "Martha would never have left me homeless." Pete's expression was sympathetic, but firm. "You need a lawyer, Dane. Get a copy of the real will. File for an emergency injunction. Something official. Without legal backing, my hands are tied." I left the station feeling defeated. A lawyer would cost money I no longer had access to. Walking aimlessly down Main Street, I passed Larry's Hardware, where my old friend Larry Peterson had run the family business for 40 years. On impulse, I went inside. Larry looked up from the register and did a double-take. "Dane, good Lord, man, you look terrible. I heard about Martha. I'm so sorry I couldn't make it to the funeral. My daughter Trish had surgery that day." I gave him the shortened version of my situation, too embarrassed to include the part about sleeping in a dog shed. But Larry saw right through me. "Where are you staying right now?" he asked sharply. My silence was answer enough. "That's it. You're coming home with me," he declared, flipping the OPN sign to close despite it being only 3 in the afternoon. "Nancy's got the guest room all made up, and you're staying with us until this gets sorted." I tried to protest, but Larry wouldn't hear it. "Martha brought soup to Nancy every day for 6 weeks when she broke her hip last year. We owe her, and we owe you. Now stop being stubborn and let your friends help." That night, after the first real meal and hot shower I'd had in days, Larry and I sat on his back porch with cups of coffee. "You need to fight this, Dane," he said. "First thing tomorrow, we're going to the bank to figure out what happened to your accounts. Then we find Martha's real lawyer." I called every firm in town, I said. "Nobody's heard of a James Wilson practicing elder law." "Then he's either new or fake," Larry said. "Either way, Something stinks about this whole situation. What about your neighbor, Frank? Didn't he and Martha chat all the time over the fence? Maybe she mentioned something to him. Frank Carter was 82 and had lived next door to us for 30 years. His wife, Georgia, had passed a decade earlier, and he and Martha had formed a friendship based on gardening advice and neighborhood gossip. I realized I hadn't thought to ask him if Martha had mentioned anything about changing her will. The next morning, Larry drove me to Frank's house. The elderly man welcomed us with coffee and concern written across his weathered face. "Been wondering where you went to," he said. "Saw that son of yours throwing your things out. Would have called, but I don't have your number." "Frank, did Martha ever mention changing her will to you?" I asked. "Or meeting with a lawyer named James Wilson?" Frank frowned, stirring sugar into his coffee. "Not by name, no. But she did mention someone pressuring her about the house during her last few months. Thought it was strange. Pressuring her how?" I asked, feeling a chill. "She said someone kept telling her she needed to secure Greg's future and make arrangements while she still could. I assumed it was that financial advisor fellow who started coming around." "What financial advisor?" This was the first I'd heard of such a person. "Tall man, fancy car. Started visiting maybe 3 months before she passed. Always came when you were at the pharmacy picking up her medications. She'd meet him on the porch, and they never seemed friendly visits. Once I heard her telling him, 'That's not what we discussed,' sounding real upset. Larry and I exchanged glances. "Did you ever get his name?" Larry asked. Frank shook his head. "Never introduced himself to me. But Martha seemed stressed after his visits. Last time he came, about 2 weeks before she passed, I heard her say, 'I won't sign anything else without my husband present.'" The man left, looking angry. This was a revelation. Martha had never mentioned these visits or any financial advisor to me. We'd always handled our modest finances together. Through the same local bank we'd used our entire marriage. Back at Larry's, his daughter Trish joined us for dinner. Trish worked as a paralegal at Brewster and Hamilton, one of the larger law firms in the next town over. "This James Wilson doesn't exist in any legal directory I can access," she told us after I showed her the paperwork Greg had given me. "And this document isn't even a proper will. It's what we call a testamentary letter, which isn't legally binding without being incorporated into an actual will executed with proper witnesses." "So it's worthless?" I asked, hope rising for the first time in days. "By itself, yes," Trish said. "But if Greg somehow got your wife to sign a full will with this attorney, that would be different. When was the last time you saw your official will, the one you and Martha prepared together?" I tried to remember. "Maybe 2 years ago. We keep them in the fireproof box in the closet." My heart sank. "Which is now locked in my former bedroom." "We need to find out who Martha's actual lawyer was," Trish advised. "The one who drew up your original wills. They would have copies on file." "That would be Tom Brennan," I said. "But he's been on an extended vacation. His office said he won't be back for another week." "Then we wait for Tom and keep digging," Larry said. "In the meantime, let's check your bank records. You had joint accounts, right?" The next day, I visited our bank with my ID and social security card. The teller's expression turned uncomfortable as she pulled up our account information. "Mr. Hansen, your joint checking account was emptied via wire transfer on April 15th, she said, turning the screen so I could see, for $42,374. The request was processed with proper ID and your joint account password. April 15th was the day after Martha's funeral. The transfer was authorized with my son's ID, but supposedly with my verbal permission over the phone, something I had never given. "That's fraud," I said. "I never authorized this." The bank manager was called over, paperwork was filled out, and a fraud investigation was opened. But I was warned these investigations could take weeks or months, with no guarantee of recovering the funds if they'd already been spent. As we left the bank, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. "Mr. Hansen? This is Linda from Dr. Abernathy's office. We've been trying to reach you about your wife's medical records request." "What request?" I asked, confused. "Someone called last week asking for copies of Mrs. Hansen's complete medical file, including prescription history. We explained we need signed authorization, and they said you would be coming in to sign the forms. We just wanted to confirm if you're still planning to do that." I never made this request, I said, alarmed. Who called you? The gentleman said he was your son, calling on your behalf. He was quite insistent. I thanked her and hung up, turning to Larry with growing concern. Why would Greg want Martha's medical records? Before Larry could answer, my phone rang again. This time it was Jessica. Dane, she whispered, sounding frightened. I found something you need to see. Greg has texts with someone named Wilson discussing getting the old man out permanently and splitting the profits. And there's something else. I found prescription bottles hidden in his drawer. They look like the same medication Martha was taking at the end. Jessica's discovery sent my mind spinning with dark possibilities. Why would Greg have Martha's medications? And what did getting the old man out permanently mean? I didn't want to think my own son capable of truly sinister actions, but the evidence was painting an increasingly disturbing picture. We need to meet somewhere. Greg won't find us, I told Jessica. Can you get away this afternoon? Greg's meeting someone about the house at 3, she said. I could say I'm taking the twins to the park. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop on the other side of town. Larry insisted on coming with me, saying I shouldn't face this alone. Jessica arrived with twin 10-year-olds Andy and Alice in tow. They ran to hug me immediately. Grandpa, Dad said you moved away, Alice said, clinging to my waist. We missed you, Andy added. Why didn't you say goodbye? My heart broke all over again. I didn't move away by choice, I said carefully, not wanting to disparage their father despite everything. It's complicated, grown-up stuff, but I miss you both terribly. Jessica sent the kids to a table with hot chocolates and cookies, out of earshot but where she could see them. I took photos of the texts and the medication bottles, she said, showing me her phone. I was looking for the car keys in his jacket and found his phone unlocked. The text conversation was between Greg and someone saved as Wilson with no profile picture. The messages stretched back nearly 6 months, beginning around when Martha first got sick. Target acquired paperwork. Get old man's signature while distracted with hospital. Split sale 70, over 30 your favor. Old man not signing. Need new plan. Alternative paperwork almost ready. Keep stalling. Med schedule working. She's getting worse faster now. We'll be over soon. Don't get cold feet. Think of the money. House worth $450K minimum in this market. Got final signature. Now just need to get old man out permanently. Meeting buyer next week. Paperwork ready once occupant removed. I felt physically ill reading the exchanges. He was planning this the whole time, I whispered, using Martha's illness as cover. There's more, Jessica said, her voice trembling. I found these hidden in an aspirin bottle. She showed me photos of prescription bottles with Martha's name on them. It's the pain medication she was taking at the end, but the dates are strange. Some of these should have been empty based on her dosage schedule, but they're still half full, and there are pills mixed together that shouldn't be. Larry studied the photos. My sister's a nurse. She says mixing these particular medications can cause rapid decline in someone already weakened by cancer. Did the doctors ever seem surprised by how quickly Martha deteriorated? I thought back to Martha's last weeks. Her oncologist had indeed commented several times on how rapidly her condition was worsening, faster than the typical progression. At the time, we all assumed it was just the aggressive nature of pancreatic cancer. Now, a more terrible possibility loomed. Are you saying Greg might have hastened her death? I couldn't bring myself to use stronger words. I don't know, Jessica said, tears forming. I don't want to believe it, but he's changed so much. The gambling debts started about a year ago. He kept them secret at first, but then collectors started calling. He said he had a plan to fix everything, that a big payday was coming. After Martha got sick, he became obsessed with the house, constantly checking property values and talking to realtors. The twins finished their hot chocolates and began getting restless. Jessica gathered their things, promising to keep investigating discreetly and to call me if she discovered anything else. After they left, Larry and I sat in stunned silence. We need to take this to the police, he finally said. With what proof? I asked. Photos of text messages and pill bottles? They'll say it's circumstantial and still a civil matter regarding the house. Then we need more evidence, Larry determined. And we need to find out who this Wilson person really is. Through Trish's connections, We managed to get an appointment with a lawyer who specialized in elder abuse and fraud cases. Patricia Winters reviewed our evidence and confirmed our fears. This has all the hallmarks of a fraudulent will situation, possibly compounded by financial exploitation and elder abuse, she said grimly. The problem is proving it. Without the original will or testimony from Martha's legitimate attorney, it's your word against your son's. Her real lawyer, Tom Brennan, returns next week, I said. Good. He should have copies of any legitimate will on file. In the meantime, I suggest documenting everything, including your son's behavior and these text messages. If there's any chance your wife's medication was being tampered with, we should consider requesting a toxicology report, though that would require exhumation, which is an extreme step. The thought of disturbing Martha's rest made me physically recoil, but Patricia's words drove home the potential seriousness of what we were uncovering. We left with a plan to gather more evidence and wait for Tom Brennan's return. That evening, while having dinner at Larry's, I received another call from Jessica. Greg knows I found something, she whispered urgently. He went through my phone while I was bathing the twins. He's furious, demanding to know what I told you. I said nothing, but he didn't believe me. I'm taking the kids to my sister's in Mapleton tonight while he's out. I don't feel safe anymore. Do you need me to come get you? I offered immediately. No, he just left. Said he has to fix the problem. Dane, be careful. I've never seen him like this. After I hung up, Larry insisted on driving by my house to make sure Jessica and the twins got away safely. As we parked down the street, we saw Jessica loading suitcases into her car, while the twins waited inside, looking confused and scared. 20 minutes later, they drove away. I resisted the urge to approach them, not wanting to delay their escape in case Greg returned early. Back at Larry's, I tried to relax, but a sense of foreboding hung over me. My phone rang just after 11 with an unknown number. "We know what you're doing," a distorted voice said. "Stop digging, or you'll regret it." "Who is this?" I demanded. "Last warning, old man. Accidents happen to nosy people." The call disconnected. When I tried calling back, a recorded message said the number was no longer in service. The next morning, Larry discovered all 4 tires on his car had been slashed overnight. There was no note, but the message was clear. Someone was watching us and wanted us to stop investigating. Later that day, Trish called with news. "I think I found your Wilson," she said excitedly. "There's a Scott Wilson who was disbarred 3 years ago for fraud and misrepresentation. He was specifically targeting elderly clients and charging them for unnecessary legal services. That has to be him," I said. "But how did he connect with Greg?" "I'm still working on that," Trish replied. "But there's something else. Tom Brennan's office called me back. He's returning from vacation early because of some urgent matter with several clients' wills. He'll be back the day after tomorrow and wants to meet with you immediately." For the first time since being thrown out of my home, I felt a glimmer of hope. Tom had been our lawyer for over 20 years. If anyone knew Martha's true wishes, it would be him. That night, another anonymous call came through. This time, the voice didn't bother with disguise. "We know you're meeting Brennan," Greg's voice growled. "It won't help you. The house is already being sold. You'll never prove anything." "Greg, what have you done?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Your mother would be heartbroken. Mom never appreciated what I deserved." He spat back. "I was always second to your precious house. Well, now it's mine, and soon it'll be cash in my pocket. Stay away from Brennan if you know what's good for you." The call ended, leaving me shaken but more determined than ever to expose the truth. Whatever Greg and this Wilson character had done, they wouldn't get away with it. The next day passed in tense anticipation. Larry and I drove by my house several times, noting with alarm that a meeting buyers sign had appeared on the front lawn. Greg was accelerating his plans to sell, clearly hoping to complete the transaction before I could challenge his ownership. That evening, my phone rang once more. This time, it was a familiar voice that filled me with hope. "Dane, it's Tom Brennan. I just got back into town and heard what's been happening. I'm so sorry about Martha and about this situation with Greg. There's something very important you need to know about Martha's will, but I can't discuss it over the phone. Can you come to my office first thing tomorrow morning? Say 8 a.m. before my regular hours. I'll be there. I promised, feeling like a drowning man who'd just been thrown a lifeline. Tom Brennan's law office occupied a modest suite in a converted Victorian house downtown. Larry insisted on driving me there, concerned about Greg's escalating threats. "I'll wait in the car," he said as we pulled up 15 minutes early. "Call me if you need anything." The office was still officially closed, but Tom himself answered when I knocked. He looked tired from travel but greeted me with a warm handshake and genuine sympathy. "Dane, I'm truly sorry about Martha. She was a wonderful woman, and I'm appalled at what I've been hearing about Greg's actions." He led me into his wood-paneled office and closed the door. "My secretary called me in Bermuda last week about some irregularities. Apparently, someone claiming to be you called requesting copies of Martha's will, but the caller couldn't answer our security questions correctly. Then I heard from Patricia Winters that you've been effectively evicted from your own home by Greg. I caught an early flight back to sort this out. Greg claims Martha changed her will before she died," I explained. "Left everything to him with nothing for me." He showed me paperwork signed by someone named James Wilson. Tom's eyebrows shot up. "That's impossible. Martha never changed her will with our firm, and we've been your family's legal counsel for over 20 years. He turned to his computer and pulled up a file. "The last will Martha executed was 14 months ago, after her initial diagnosis. You both updated your wills at the same time, as you always did." He swiveled the screen so I could see the document, clearly showing our matching wills with Martha's signature at the bottom, dated just after her cancer diagnosis. According to this document, everything was to pass to the surviving spouse, with provisions for Greg only after both of us were gone. "Then the will Greg showed me was fake?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Completely fraudulent," Tom confirmed. "But here's what's truly disturbing. Someone has been calling around to various banks and investment firms, trying to access Martha's accounts using a forged power of attorney. My office received at least 3 verification requests that we denied. That must be why Greg emptied our joint account the day after the funeral," I said. "It was the only one he could access legally." Tom looked grim. "Dane, I need to tell you something important. Martha came to see me privately about 2 months before she passed. She was very concerned about Greg's behavior, saying he'd been pressuring her to change her will and sign over the house. She suspected someone was influencing him, possibly connected to gambling debts." My heart sank hearing this confirmation of Jessica's suspicions. "Did she change anything?" "Not in the way Greg claims," Tom said, "but she did add a codicil, a legal amendment, to her will." He retrieved another document from his files. "Martha wanted to protect both you and the house, while still helping Greg if possible. The codicil stipulated that upon Martha's death, the house would pass jointly to Greg and me, with the crucial provision that I would retain lifetime residency rights regardless of Greg's wishes. Additionally, there were strict conditions preventing the sale of the house without mutual consent as long as I was alive. She wanted Greg to learn financial responsibility through shared ownership," Tom explained. "But she was adamant that you never be displaced from your home. Did Greg know about this?" I asked. "No. Martha asked me to keep it confidential until after her passing. She was worried about his reaction if he learned he wouldn't get the house outright." Tom reached into his desk drawer and pulled out an envelope. "She also left this for you. I was instructed to give it to you at the official will reading, which was scheduled for next week. Given the circumstances, I think you should have it now." The envelope bore my name in Martha's familiar handwriting. Inside was a 3-page letter written during her final weeks. I read it with tears blurring my vision. "My dearest Dane," it began. "If you're reading this, I've left this world ahead of you, though you'll always carry my heart with you. First and foremost, know that I loved you completely every day of our marriage, and leaving you is my only regret in passing." Martha went on to explain her concerns about Greg's behavior in her final months. She described his increasingly desperate requests for money, his unexplained meetings with someone she didn't trust, and her fear that he was involved in something dangerous. "Someone has been pressuring me to change my will," she wrote. "I've pretended to cooperate while secretly ensuring our real wishes are protected with Tom. If anything unusual happens after I'm gone, trust only Tom Brennan with our legal matters." The letter concluded with her hopes for reconciliation between Greg and me. "Despite everything, our son is troubled. but he's still our child. I believe there's goodness in him, buried beneath whatever has driven him to these desperate acts. Don't give up on him entirely, though protect yourself first." I carefully folded the letter and returned it to the envelope, overcome with emotion. Martha had known something was wrong and had taken steps to protect me, even as she fought her final battle with cancer. "There's more," Tom said gently. Martha recorded a video statement expressing her wishes and confirming she was under pressure to change her will. She wanted evidence in case of exactly this type of situation. He turned his computer screen toward me again and played a video file. Martha appeared, looking thin but clear-eyed, sitting in what appeared to be Tom's office. I, Martha Elizabeth Hanson, being of sound mind though failing body, make this statement freely and without coercion, she began formally. I affirm that my true wishes are contained in my official will dated January 20th last year, along with the codicil executed today. Any other documents purporting to be my will are fraudulent and executed under duress or deception. She went on to describe how Greg and an unnamed financial advisor had repeatedly pressured her to sign various documents when I wasn't present. I signed some papers to appease them and buy time, but I immediately contacted Tom Brennan to ensure my true wishes would be legally protected. The video ended with Martha looking directly into the camera. "Dane, my love, if you're watching this, something has gone wrong. Trust Tom to make things right. And remember that despite everything, I died happy knowing I was loved completely by you." Tom stopped the video, giving me a moment to compose myself. This, along with the official will and codicil, gives us everything we need to challenge Greg's fraudulent claims. I've already filed an emergency petition with the probate court to have you restored to your home immediately. I was about to respond when a commotion erupted in the outer office. Raised voices were followed by the sound of something heavy falling over. Then the office door burst open, and Greg stood there, red-faced and wild-eyed. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he shouted at me, ignoring Tom completely. "Mr. Hanson, you need to leave immediately," Tom said firmly, reaching for his phone. "This is a private meeting." Greg strode forward and slammed his hand down on the desk. "You're too late. The house is already sold. Papers signed yesterday." "That's impossible," Tom replied calmly. "You don't have legal title to sell. Any transaction would be invalid. Tell that to the $50,000 deposit in my account." Greg sneered. "Buyers don't care about your technicalities." Tom looked unfazed. "Actually, they will care very much when their title search reveals they've purchased property from someone with no legal right to sell it. That's called fraud, and it's a criminal offense." Greg's face faltered momentarily before hardening again. "You're bluffing. I have a will signed by Mom giving me everything. A fraudulent will signed under duress, according to your mother's own recorded testimony," Tom replied, turning the computer screen so Greg could see the paused video of Martha. "Would you like to watch your mother explain how you pressured her while she was dying?" Greg's expression shifted from anger to panic. "This is all lies. Dad manipulated her when she was drugged up on pain meds. She wasn't thinking clearly." "Interesting theory," Tom said, "especially given what your wife found hidden in your drawer. The medication bottles that somehow still had pills that should have been administered to your mother." Greg's face went pale. "Jessica's been talking to you? That bitch has no idea what she's saying." "Actually, the police are very interested in what she has to say," Tom continued. "They've already taken her statement about the medications and the texts between you and Scott Wilson, the disbarred attorney who helped you create fraudulent legal documents. They're particularly interested in messages discussing getting the old man out permanently." This was a bluff, I realized. We hadn't yet gone to the police with Jessica's evidence. But Greg didn't know that, and Tom's confident tone was clearly rattling him. "You can't prove anything," Greg said, but his voice had lost its edge. "I can prove the will is fraudulent," Tom replied. "I can prove you attempted to sell property you don't own. I can prove financial elder abuse through the emptied bank accounts. And with a toxicology report on your mother's remains, we might be able to prove something far worse." Greg's face drained of all color. "You wouldn't dig her up. Dad would never allow that." I found my voice at last. "I never thought my son would throw me out of my home or steal my life savings either. But here we are. The fight seemed to drain out of Greg. His shoulders slumped, and for a moment, I caught a glimpse of the scared little boy he'd once been. The outer office door opened again, and Officer Pete Simmons entered, followed by another uniformed officer. Larry was behind them, looking apologetic. "Sorry, Dane," he said. "I saw Greg storm in and called Pete. Thought you might need backup." Pete surveyed the tense scene. "Everything all right in here?" "Actually, officer," Tom said smoothly, "Mr. Gregory Hansen was just leaving. But you might want to ask him about his association with Scott Wilson, a disbarred attorney currently under investigation for multiple counts of fraud." Greg looked trapped, his eyes darting between the officers and the exit. "Scott Wilson?" Pete repeated, his interest clearly piqued. "Names come up in a fraud investigation we're running. You know him, Greg?" "I want a lawyer," Greg said immediately. Pete raised an eyebrow. "Nobody's accusing you of anything yet, son. Just asking a question." "I want a lawyer," Greg repeated, folding his arms. Pete sighed. "Suit yourself, but we'll be in touch very soon. Count on it." As the officers escorted Greg from the building, Tom turned to me with a satisfied expression. "That went better than I expected. Now, let's get you back into your home where you belong." The next 48 hours were a whirlwind of legal proceedings. Tom filed emergency motions with the probate court, presenting Martha's authentic will, the video testimony, and evidence of Greg's fraudulent activities. By Tuesday afternoon, the judge had issued a temporary order restoring my residency rights and freezing any potential sale of the property pending a full hearing. Sheriff's deputies accompanied me back to the house to enforce the court order. Greg's car was gone, but the place was in disarray, with half-packed boxes scattered throughout and unfamiliar furniture already delivered for the new owners. My bedroom had been completely cleared out, with my personal belongings either boxed up haphazardly in the garage or simply thrown away. "You can change the locks," the lead deputy advised. "The court order permits it given the circumstances." I arranged for a locksmith immediately, then began the painful process of reclaiming my home. Larry and Nancy helped me move back in, setting up my bedroom with borrowed linens and clothing until I could sort through what remained of my possessions. "What a mess," Nancy muttered, as we cleaned up broken picture frames Greg had smashed in apparent rage. "Martha would be heartbroken to see this." I picked up a shattered frame containing our wedding photo, carefully removing the image from the broken glass. "At least the important things can be saved," I said, though the pain of Greg's betrayal cut deeper than any property damage. Later that evening, Jessica called. "The police came to Megan's house looking for Greg," she said, referring to her sister where she and the twins were staying. "They have a warrant for questioning related to financial fraud. Do you know where he is?" "He hasn't been back to the house," I told her. "Jessica, I'm so sorry you and the kids are caught up in this. None of this is your fault," she said firmly. "I've suspected something was wrong for months, but I didn't want to believe it. The twins keep asking when they can see you." "Anytime," I said immediately. "This is still their grandmother's house, and they're always welcome here. I'll bring them by tomorrow," she promised. "They need stability right now." The next morning brought another development. Pete Simmons called to inform me that Scott Wilson had been arrested on multiple fraud charges. He rolled over on Greg almost immediately, Pete said. "Claims your son approached him at a gambling establishment about 6 months ago, desperate for money to cover debts. Wilson suggested the real estate fraud scheme, promising Greg a big payday once they sold the house out from under you." "And the medication we found?" I asked, dreading the answer. "Wilson claims no knowledge of that," Pete replied carefully. "But we've obtained a warrant for a toxicology examination of Martha's remains. I know that's difficult to hear, Dane, but we need to know if there was foul play involved in her death." I closed my eyes, pain washing over me. "Do what you need to do, Pete. Martha deserves justice, whatever form that takes. We're still looking for Greg," Pete added. "His car was found abandoned at the bus station. We think he might be trying to flee the state." After Pete's call, I sat alone in the living room, surrounded by the home Martha and I had built together. Despite having it back, the victory felt hollow. My son was a fugitive, possibly implicated in hastening his own mother's death. How had we come to this? The doorbell rang, interrupting my dark thoughts. Tom Brennan stood on the porch, holding a thick folder. "The court scheduled an emergency hearing for tomorrow morning," he announced as I invited him in. "We need to prepare your testimony." We spent the next several hours reviewing documents and formulating our case. Tom was confident the judge would permanently invalidate Greg's fraudulent will and confirm my ownership rights under Martha's authentic will. "What about the codicil giving Greg partial ownership?" I asked. Tom looked at me carefully. "Given the circumstances, we could petition to have that provision voided." Martha clearly didn't anticipate the extent of Greg's deception. I thought about Martha's letter, her hope for eventual reconciliation, despite everything. "Let's keep it as she intended," I decided. "Greg will have to face legal consequences for his actions, but I won't go against Martha's wishes." Tom nodded, understanding in his eyes. She always saw the best in people, even when they didn't deserve it. Just as Tom was preparing to leave, Jessica arrived with the twins. Andy and Alice ran to me, wrapping their arms around my waist in simultaneous hugs. "Grandpa, we missed you so much," Alice exclaimed. "Is this your house again now?" Andy asked. "Mom said Dad did something bad and that's why we can't go home." I exchanged glances with Jessica, unsure how much to explain to 10-year-olds about their father's crimes. "Yes, this is my house again," I said simply. "And you're welcome here anytime." "Can we see Grandma's garden?" Alice asked. Dad wouldn't let us go out there anymore. The garden had been Martha's pride and joy, a carefully tended space filled with perennials she'd nurtured for decades. I hadn't had the heart to look at it since returning to the house. "Of course," I said, leading them through the back door. To my surprise, despite weeks of neglect, Martha's flowers were blooming defiantly, a riot of spring colors against the weathered fence. "It's pretty, like Grandma," Alice said, carefully touching a purple iris, Martha's favorite flower. "She told me these flowers come back every year, even when you think they're gone forever," Andy added thoughtfully. "Out of the mouths of babes," I thought, feeling a lump in my throat. Even in death, Martha was still teaching lessons about resilience and beauty persisting through hardship. As the twins explored the garden, Tom pulled me aside. "Court starts at 9 tomorrow. Try to get some rest tonight." After he left, Jessica approached hesitantly. "I just got a text from a number I don't recognize," she said, showing me her phone. "It's Greg. He wants to meet with me privately to explain everything. Says he's innocent and being framed by Wilson." "You can't go alone," I said immediately. "It could be dangerous." "I know," she agreed. "I've already forwarded it to Officer Simmons. But Dane," she paused, conflict evident in her expression. "What if there's some explanation? For the twins' sake, I need to know the whole truth." I understood her dilemma. Despite everything, Greg was still the father of her children, and she needed closure one way or another. "Pete will know how to handle it," I assured her. "But be careful. Greg is desperate now, and desperate people make dangerous choices." The next morning, I dressed in my best suit for court. Tom had advised me to appear respectable and composed, regardless of the emotional turmoil I felt inside. Larry arrived to drive me downtown, his silent support a balm to my nerves. As we approached the courthouse steps, we saw a crowd gathered near the entrance. News of the case had apparently spread, with local media covering what they were calling a shocking case of elder abuse and fraud. I kept my head down, not wanting to engage with reporters shouting questions. Inside, the courtroom was nearly full. Tom met us in the hallway, looking grimly satisfied. "We have everything we need," he assured me. The judge has already reviewed Martha's video testimony privately and was clearly moved by it. As we entered the courtroom, I was surprised to see Jessica sitting in the front row. She hadn't mentioned attending the hearing. Even more surprising was who sat beside her. Greg, looking haggard and defeated, flanked by 2 police officers. "What's happening?" I whispered to Tom. "He turned himself in this morning," Tom explained. "Apparently he's agreed to a full confession in exchange for consideration in sentencing." Before I could process this information, the bailiff called the court to order, and the judge entered, a stern-looking woman in her 60s. "This is an unusual case," she began without preamble. "Normally, will contests take months to resolve, but the evidence of fraud here is so overwhelming that I've expedited proceedings." She looked directly at Greg. "Mr. Gregory Hansen, I understand you wish to make a statement before I issue my ruling. Greg stood slowly, handcuffs visible beneath his suit jacket. For the first time, I noticed how much he'd aged in recent months. Deep lines etched around his eyes and mouth. Yes, Your Honor, he said, his voice hoarse. I want to confess to creating a fraudulent will and attempting to defraud my father out of his home. Scott Wilson helped me with the legal documents, but the plan was mine. The judge nodded. And what about the allegations regarding your mother's medication? A visible shudder passed through Greg's body. I didn't directly tamper with her medication, but I knew Wilson was having someone do it. A nurse he knew who would visit when Dad was out getting groceries or picking up prescriptions. I told myself it was just to make her comfortable, to help her sleep so she wouldn't be in pain. His voice broke. I never wanted her to die faster. I needed money for your gambling debts. The judge finished for him. Greg nodded miserably. The house would have covered everything. Wilson had buyers lined up before Mom even passed. All I had to do was get Dad out. He turned to face me directly, tears streaming down his face. I told myself you'd be fine, that you could live with Larry or in a retirement community, that Mom would understand, because she always protected me. But then I saw the video of her testimony, and he couldn't continue. The judge allowed a moment of silence before speaking again. Mr. Hansen, your actions constitute elder abuse, fraud, conspiracy, and potentially charges related to your mother's death pending toxicology results. Do you understand that? Yes, Your Honor, Greg whispered. She turned to me. Mr. Dane Hansen, the court recognizes you as the rightful owner of the property in question, pursuant to your wife's legitimate will. The fraudulent documents are hereby invalidated. She paused, consulting another paper. Regarding the codicil leaving partial ownership to Gregory Hansen, do you wish to contest that provision given the circumstances? All eyes turned to me. I looked at my son, this broken man who had caused so much pain, and thought of Martha's final letter. She had still loved him, still believed in the possibility of redemption. No, Your Honor, I said clearly. My wife wanted our son to have partial ownership with specific conditions. I won't contest her wishes. Greg's head snapped up, shock evident on his face. He clearly hadn't expected any mercy after what he'd done. The judge nodded. Very well. The court upholds Martha Hansen's original will and codicil in full, with the provision that Gregory Hansen's interest shall be held in trust pending resolution of criminal charges. She banged her gavel. Court is adjourned. As people began filing out, Greg was led away by the officers, but he paused as he passed my seat. Dad, he said softly, I know it doesn't mean anything now, but I'm sorry. What I did to you, to Mom, there's no excuse. I met his eyes, seeing genuine remorse there for perhaps the first time in his adult life. You're right, Greg, there is no excuse. But your mother believed you could change, even at the end. For her sake, I hope she was right. He nodded once before being escorted from the courtroom. Jessica approached, uncertainty in her expression. Dane, I know it's asking a lot, but the twins need to understand what's happening with their father. Would you help me explain it to them when you're ready? Of course, I said. They deserve the truth, told with compassion. As we left the courthouse, reporters clamored for statements, but Tom deftly guided us to a side exit where Larry was waiting with his car. It's over, Tom said, shaking my hand. You can truly go home now, Dane. But as I looked back at the courthouse where my son would soon face the full consequences of his actions, I knew this wasn't really an ending, but the painful beginning of a new chapter for our broken family. 6 months passed slowly as I rebuilt my life. The house felt different now, filled with memories of Martha but also shadows of Greg's betrayal. I focused on restoring what had been damaged, both physically and emotionally. The toxicology report on Martha's remains confirmed our worst fears. Traces of excessive medication were found, indicating someone had indeed been administering higher doses than prescribed. The nurse Wilson had mentioned was identified and arrested, confessing to adjusting Martha's medication at Wilson's request. While the medical examiner couldn't definitively state that this had hastened her death, given the advanced state of her cancer, additional charges were filed against both Wilson and Greg. Greg ultimately accepted a plea deal, admitting to fraud, elder abuse, and conspiracy. Because the medication tampering couldn't be directly linked to Martha's death, he avoided the most serious potential charges. He was sentenced to 7 years in prison, with eligibility for parole after 4. Scott Wilson received a harsher sentence due to his prior convictions and role as the architect of multiple similar schemes targeting elderly homeowners. The prosecutor discovered he had attempted the same fraud with at least 5 other families, using different aliases each time. Jessica filed for divorce but agreed to supervised visits between Greg and the twins once he was settled in prison. She found a small apartment across town and took a full-time position at the hospital, determined to support her children independently. One crisp October afternoon, I received an unexpected letter from the correctional facility where Greg was serving his sentence. For days, I left it unopened on the kitchen counter, unsure if I was ready to read whatever justifications or excuses he might offer. Finally, on what would have been Martha's 71st birthday, I sat in her garden and opened the envelope. "Dad," the letter began, "I know you probably threw this away without reading it, and I wouldn't blame you. But on the slim chance you're reading these words, I need you to know something important." Greg's handwriting was neat and precise, so unlike his usual hasty scrawl. He continued, "The prison psychologist has been helping me understand why I did what I did. There's a name for it, apparently. This desperate need to escape consequences by creating bigger and bigger lies. It started with small gambling losses I thought I could win back, then larger ones I hid from Jessica, then loans from people who don't offer repayment plans." He described how Wilson had found him at a low-stakes poker game, losing money he didn't have. Wilson presented himself as a financial advisor who specialized in creative solutions for people in trouble. Their initial plan was just to borrow against the house's equity. But when Martha's cancer diagnosis came, Wilson saw a more lucrative opportunity. "I told myself it was fate," Greg wrote, "that Mom's illness was a terrible thing that could at least solve my problems. Wilson convinced me you'd be fine in a retirement community, that at your age you didn't need a big house anyway." Each step seemed small at the time, each lie just a little bigger than the last, until I couldn't see any way back. The letter continued for several pages, not asking for forgiveness but expressing genuine remorse. "The worst part isn't the prison sentence," Greg concluded. "It's knowing what Mom would think of me now. She always believed I was better than I am. I never deserved her faith, but I think about it every day. I don't expect you to ever trust me again, but I am trying to become someone who might have earned Mom's confidence, someone who might someday be a father my children could respect." I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in its envelope. There were no easy answers here, no clear path to healing such deep wounds. But Martha had been right about one thing. There was still a glimmer of goodness in our son, however deeply buried. 2 weeks later, I visited Greg in prison for the first time. The conversation was awkward and painful, but it was a beginning. I made no promises of forgiveness or reconciliation, but I listened, really listened, as he spoke about his therapy and his growing understanding of the damage he had caused. "The twins ask about you all the time," I told him toward the end of our allotted hour. "They miss their father." "Do they know what I did?" he asked, shame evident in his hunched shoulders. Jessica and I explained it as simply as we could, that you made bad choices because you were scared about money, and now you're facing consequences but working to be better. Tears filled his eyes. "That's more kindness than I deserve." "It's not about what you deserve," I said. "It's about what they need. Children need to believe their parents are redeemable, even when the evidence suggests otherwise." As the months passed, Jessica and the twins became regular visitors at my house. The children spent weekends with me while Jessica worked extra shifts, slowly rebuilding her savings. We planted new flowers in Martha's garden, the twins carefully following the gardening journal their grandmother had kept for years. Larry and Nancy joined us frequently for dinner, becoming the extended family we all needed. Larry helped me finally replace the leaky roof and rebuild the back deck, projects Martha and I had planned to tackle together in retirement. On the anniversary of Martha's death, I hosted a small gathering to celebrate her life rather than mourn her passing. Jessica came with the twins, and to my surprise, She asked if I would be willing to accompany her and the children on their next visit to see Greg. "The kids need to see that you two can be civil," she explained. "That adults can make terrible mistakes but still work toward healing. It would mean a lot to them." I agreed, though the prospect filled me with apprehension. The next Saturday, I found myself back in the prison visiting room, sitting beside Jessica as the twins eagerly told their father about school and their new friends. Watching Greg with his children, I saw glimpses of the son Martha had always believed in. He listened attentively, asked thoughtful questions, and gently encouraged them without the impatience that had marked so much of his earlier parenting. When the hour ended, he thanked me for coming, his eyes conveying what words couldn't adequately express. "Mom would have wanted this," I said simply. Over the next year, these visits became monthly occurrences. I wouldn't claim that Greg and I rebuilt our relationship, but we established something new in its place. A cautious connection founded on honesty rather than obligation. Greg's counselor reported consistent progress. He had become a peer mentor for other inmates struggling with gambling addiction and was completing his GED with plans for further education while incarcerated. 18 months after his sentencing, Greg was granted a supervised day release to attend Alice and Andy's elementary school graduation. Jessica asked if the ceremony could be held in Martha's garden, giving Greg a chance to briefly return home under strict supervision. The day arrived with perfect June weather, sunlight filtering through the oak trees Martha had planted when Greg was born. Folding chairs were arranged on the lawn, with a small podium decorated with flowers from the garden. Greg arrived with his correctional officer, wearing a dress shirt and slacks instead of his usual prison attire. The twins ran to hug him, excited to show him their graduation certificates and art projects. He moved carefully, conscious of the officer watching nearby, but the joy on his face was unmistakable. The small ceremony was simple but meaningful. Larry took photographs as each twin received their certificates and special awards. Jessica had prepared a modest reception with punch and homemade cookies using Martha's recipes. As the event wound down, Greg asked for a moment to visit Martha's favorite spot in the garden, the small bench beneath the flowering cherry tree. The officer accompanied him, but stood at a respectful distance. I watched from the patio as my son sat on the bench, head bowed, lips moving in what appeared to be a private conversation with his mother's memory. After several minutes, he rejoined the group, eyes red but calm. "Thank you for allowing me to be here," he said quietly as the officer prepared to take him back to the facility. This was Mom's favorite day of the year, school celebrations. She wouldn't have missed this for anything. "She's still here in her own way," I replied, gesturing to the thriving garden, watching over all of us. That evening, after everyone had gone, I sat alone on Martha's bench, reflecting on the long journey from that terrible day when Greg had thrown me out of my home. The pain hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed into something more complex, interwoven with new understandings and cautious hope. Martha's final letter to me had ended with words I'd returned to countless times. "The true inheritance we leave isn't property or possessions, but the capacity to rebuild what's broken. Remember how we built our home together? Nail by nail, brick by brick. Sometimes life requires the same patient reconstruction of what storms have damaged." In my 69th year, I was learning that rebuilding could take many forms. The house was whole again, the roof no longer leaked, and the garden bloomed more vibrantly than ever. But the deeper reconstruction happened in less visible ways. In monthly prison visits, in weekends with grandchildren who needed stability, in the slow, halting conversations between father and son trying to find a way forward through damage that once seemed irreparable. 1 year later, Greg was transferred to a minimum security facility with a work release program. He found a job with a construction company that specialized in hiring formerly incarcerated individuals, learning carpentry skills that reminded me of teaching him to build a treehouse when he was 10. Jessica remained divorced, but maintained an amicable relationship with Greg for the twins' sake. She had been promoted at the hospital and purchased a small townhouse within walking distance of my home, allowing the children to visit easily. On the afternoon of my 70th birthday, I received another letter from Greg. This one contained no lengthy explanations or apologies, just a simple card with a photograph tucked inside. The picture showed a small wooden jewelry box, beautifully crafted with inlaid wood, forming Martha's favorite iris pattern on the lid. Made this in the prison woodshop, Greg had written. The instructor says, "I have your hands. Never noticed that before. Happy birthday, Dad. I'm trying to build something better, day by day." I placed the photo on the mantel beside Martha's picture, two pieces of a story still unfolding. Outside, the twins called to me from the garden, eager to show me the new rose bush they'd planted as my birthday gift. As I joined them in the sunshine, I thought about that terrible rainy night in the dog shed, clutching Martha's photo while my world collapsed around me. One phone call had indeed changed everything, but the true change had come through hundreds of smaller moments afterward, each one a choice to move toward healing rather than bitterness. Life only truly ends when we stop rebuilding, Martha used to say. Standing in our garden surrounded by new growth, watching our grandchildren tend plants that would bloom for years to come, I knew she had been right all along. Did you have a similar experience with family betrayal, or know someone who has? The road to healing is never easy, but I've found that forgiveness, even when it seems impossible, often frees the forgiver more than the forgiven. Please share your thoughts in the comments, and if this story resonated with you, consider liking, subscribing, and sharing it with someone who might need to hear that even the deepest wounds can eventually heal. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find strength for whatever rebuilding you might need in your own life.